What's up? We got Arrow Season 3, Episode 8, The Brave and the Bold. The second and final part of the Flash vs. Arrow crossover. So this episode starts off with Roy with the Arrow in Arsenal breaking into the guy that Dig Harkness's house. We're gonna name it Digger Harkness, so I'm gonna call him Digger Harkness. So he decides to. That sounds like Agatha Harkness from WandaVision. Do they have any revelation? Does Agatha Harkness and Digger Harkness have any relation, or does these shows just like he's named Harkness? Harkness. I have no idea. So, but anyway, Argus decided to show up, and he's like the guy that was killed with the boomerang. He was an Argus agent, and he was like, this means this was an Argus matter. So he's like, give this up, guy. But Roy's like, are we gonna give this up? And he's like, what do you think? So let me see Caitlin and Cisco show up, and they've been analyzing on the Arrow that killed Sarah. R.I.P. my TV child, Sarah Lance. I'm still in TV show therapy for this show. It's fake therapy, but I'm trying to cope with the death of my TV show child. Why'd you do this to me, Arrow? So he's like, we want to see the Arrow Cave, and Flex is like, we can call it that. Ever. And he's like, so Roy's like, do we just give free admission to the Arrow Cave? And I was like, see what you've done, Felicity. So we learn about Digger Harkness. So we meet Digger Harkness, and he's a former Suicide Squad member. Yeah, he's a former Suicide Squad member. So some of the Suicide Squad had to be sanitized. And Diggle said, "You mean killed, Lila?" But then the Flash shows up in a really weird CGI inspired move. He just shows up and his suit looks really CGI-ish. It doesn't look like Grant Gustin. It looks like CGI. But then when he holds the Arrow, it looks like Grant Gustin decided to show up for work in this episode. But yeah, that was so weird. Just CGI and Grant Gustin into the episode. Shame show. Shame. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so then we see so then we see so Barry flashes in and Lila's just all shocked, saying Caitlin's like, remember Barry's secret identity? And he's like, hey, Diggle told her that, and he's like, you didn't? And he was like, you guys are married. And he's like, no, I'm married. And he's like, and she's like, who are you? And he's like, the Flash. He's like, sushi? And she's like, yeah, I don't know what I just saw. And so Oliver and Barry go after a bad guy, and Oliver arrows him to give him his information, even though Oliver doesn't kill people anymore. But I know this isn't killing him, but my Aunt Dewey says that arrows become very boring. Oliver's whole killing thing is very boring, and I kind of agree. Oliver killing people was pretty interesting, but now he just punches them in the face. It makes him less fun as a character. He just punches them. I guess he's trying to honor not dishonor Tommy's memory, but them using that as an excuse for why he doesn't kill people is really boring. But anyway, back to the episode. So Oliver's like, yeah, I have to do that. Yeah, so Oliver talks. Barry confronts Oliver about him, and Oliver's like, "Hey," Oliver's like, "Barry, you live in sunshine and rain. You live in Central City, where it's all sunshine, where it's always sunny, and where you give bad guy silly code name. But this is Starling. But you're not in Central City. This is Starling City, where it's really dark, and it's a dark tone, and his best friend's dead. His former antagonist killed his mom, and yeah. So if you don't like it in Starling City, you can flash yourself back to You can go back to Central City." Well, yeah. I want to make sure I said Central City right, because there's too many cities in this show. So yeah, yeah, so then what happens is that Barry's like, I was like, "Is there something wrong with Speedy?" And he's like, "Roy? Nah." Okay. He's like, "No, I'm at the other Speedy." And he's like, the Flash. And he's like, "We're just having creative differences." And yeah. So yeah, Diggle Harkness. So Diggle Harkness plays them, and Digger Harkness attacks the Arrow Cave, attacking Lila. So Barry has to send her a Starling General. But I'm like, wouldn't people notice a guy in a red suit shows up, or wouldn't they notice a streak of yellow lightning in a hospital? Wouldn't someone notice this and be like, that's random? I guess not, because we don't see that. I'm just saying. Wouldn't someone notice that? I guess not, but I'm just saying. So yeah, so Digger Harkness is, so Oliver blames himself about how he's the reason why it all happened, and Barry's like, "Hey, if it wasn't for 5 years on the island, you came out a hero. All this, you survived as a hero." So yeah, so then but then Quentin mistakes Barry for Bart Allen and mistakes him getting struck by lightning as him getting hit by a bus, which is really funny. But I like how they call him Bart Allen, which we will learn in this universe is Barry's son. In the comics and in the Young Justice television show, it's his grandson. But I get this show can make his grandson, so they made in future Flash season, so they made him his son. I'm just saying. So yeah. So yeah. So yeah. But anyway is so yeah. So Digger Harkness decides to plant all the bombs in Starling City. It will boom. So Barry's Flash, and yeah. So we see Thea talking to Chase on the phone, and she's like, "Chase, if there's random that we see her talking to that DJ saying that they kissed once, it doesn't mean anything." And Cisco also tries to hit on Thea, saying, "Yeah, Cisco tries to hit on Thea," and he's like, "Who is that, honey?" And they're like, Oliver's sister and Roy's ex-girlfriend. And then he's like, "Okay, stay away then." Oh, Cisco. I love Cisco. He's the best. So But yeah, so they stopped Digger Harkness, and yeah, so Oliver gives Barry his first ever mannequin, and they do an arrow battle to end the episode. Okay, so I don't know how to feel about this episode. I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it's a bad crossover, but the Flash episode just had more. I liked the Flash episode more. It was great. The Flash episode is one of my favorite episodes of Flash. But part 2 is kind of not one of my favorites. I just don't like this episode. It's just not my favorite episode of The Flash. Arrow, sorry. I almost said The Flash. Arrow, and I'm gonna say it's my least favorite episode. Arrow. I wouldn't say it's bad. I mean, Digger Harkness is Roy Bigelow is a better villain than Digger Harkness. Arrow and Barry Oliver and Barry have some creative differences, even though in the last episode they worked perfectly together, which doesn't make any sense. I get it. Barry isn't used to Oliver's Central City's Oliver's strong and city dark tone, but Barry's used to Central City where it's happy, go lucky, and everything. But I'm just saying, I just didn't find this episode all that interesting. It wasn't a bad episode. But it wasn't my favorite. I think Drawback Your Bow was a better episode. We learned more about Suicide Squad, knowing that there was a previous team before them that Lila killed, or Waller killed. I have no idea, and they were sanitized, but Digger Harkness. And also, fun fact, Digger Harkness would go on to play another villain in the Arrowverse universe, Eclipso, on Stargirl Season 2 as the main villain. I think it's pretty interesting that this actor went on to play another villain, even though his villain longevity was 13 episodes long with Stargirl. But for this show, it was a 1-episode appearance. Or 2 episodes. Actually, wait, no, it's 1, because when he appears later, it's just for like a 1. He doesn't appear